Hi, everybody, and welcome to Friday Night Flock Talk. I'm Robin Sullivan of the Leather Elves. I am excited to be here tonight. I got to tell you guys, for those of you that know, we just moved. We are loving Maine. It's awesome. So it's a great Friday night. And I need to do the reminders as usual. You need to check the Leather Elves Facebook page. You can catch up on sales and any pop up events that we do. You'll also, if you like the Leather Elves and follow us, you will get notification when we go live so that in case you forget, I don't know how you could possibly forget, but in case you forget, you'll get notification of that. And you can follow the Leather Elves on Instagram and also subscribe to our YouTube channel. I am learning the YouTube way, so you gotta bear with me on that one. But I'm super excited tonight, and you guys don't know, but before we start, while Nick's playing the cool music and showing that great picture, I have some time to think and be quiet. And as I was sitting here tonight, I was thinking about the person who's the guest. And she is someone that I have known for quite a while. And you guys, some of you have met her on the live stream. And she is someone that when I talk to her anyway, and I'm sure it happens for a lot of people, she makes me smile. Just talking to her makes me smile. So I want to take some time and introduce you guys to this person. Hi, Erin. How's it going?
I'm good. I'm like tearing up over here from your comments. Thank you
Oh,
so
no, no,
much,
no.
Robin.
So I'll do the formal introduction. So Erin Katzner is the VP of Education and Outreach at the Peregrine Fund. She says she's passionate about connecting people with birds of prey and all wildlife in order to inspire caring and a desire to participate in conservation. She has extensive experience working in nonprofit administration with a focus on marketing, education, and fundraising. She's a professional animal trainer with expertise in bird training through operant learning and positive reinforcement. And she has a passion for sharing her experience in an effort to increase animal welfare in the professional animal training field. So I can tell you so much more about Erin. I was lucky enough to serve on the board of International Association of Avian Trainers and Educators with Erin, and she is wonderfully inspirational. And when she and I were talking a little bit, and I asked her if she would be on the live stream, and our topic is messaging that inspires. And I know some people probably say, well, I don't do conservation messaging because I've got my parrots and, that's it. But I thought about it, and every time we take our birds out, every time they go out in public, every time someone comes to the house to visit, we're doing messaging, whether we know it or not. So I'm gonna I've got some questions for you, Erin. And I want to welcome you and thank you for joining us again. So um,
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Robin. It's an honor to be here, and I'm so touched that you invited me back. And I hope that everybody can walk away with some tools to use when you're thinking about how you want to construct the messages that you provide for other people, whether it's, like you said, just somebody coming into your house and curious about your bird, or whether you're actually going out and trying to, doing some education programming in your community. There is a lot that we can learn by being intentional about the messages that we share.
yeah, and you said it's interesting when I read your bio. I mean, I know you, but when I read that and I realize that a lot of your focus is on marketing and education, and that conservation messaging can be really using the principles of marketing can be very helpful. So can you let people know kind of how that works for you?
Yeah. So at the Peregrine Fund, I oversee the marketing program, but I really look at marketing as education, just to a different audience, a different scale. We're just trying to educate people about what we do and why it matters and why they should want to be a part of it, why they should want to be involved. And so it is marketing, because we are trying to get people to understand who we are and what we are, but we really want them to walk away with a feeling that they can do something. We want them
Mhm.
to we want to inspire action. We don't want them just to be like, "Oh, that's nice, the Peregrine Fund, that's a cool place." We want them to actually be excited about who we are and what we do and want to be a part of it. So when I think about conservation messaging and combining that with marketing principles, there's actually a whole field of study out there called social and behavior change communications. And it's often used in conservation efforts, especially around um, the issue of trade of endangered species and endangered species products, items. And so it's not something that is new to the world of conservation and conservation messaging, but the way that we're applying it at the Peregrine Fund is with the purpose of being more intentional in what we're saying, how we're saying it, how we want to move people from the point of not knowing anything about us to wanting to be engaged at a deeper level. So when I think about crafting conservation messaging, I am looking at some of these social behavior change communications concepts. And when you look at this chart here that Nick just put up for us, you notice that there's a lot of factors to take into consideration. So when people are engaging, or when you're engaging with people, there's a lot of influences that they're experiencing. First of all, like just at a basic level, people see thousands and thousands of advertisements every day. They're getting messaged with marketing input on a regular basis. So we really have to think about how we're going to cut through that noise so that what you're saying is heard and internalized and remembered as you go away. So as you're thinking about how you're going to talk to people, it's really valuable to think about who that person is and who are their influences, not just from the partners, family, peers, but outside to organizations and services, products that they interact with, and back up to policy, legislation, politics,
Mhm.
things at a broader scale. People come to you with all sorts of preconceived notions, ideas, background that makes them who they are. And sometimes we have to cut across some of these what we call cross-cutting factors. So looking at what information do they already have? What knowledge do they already have about what you're sharing with them? What are their motivations? What do people care about? When I'm thinking about going out and talking to a donor, some people I know really care about the statistics. They want to know how much work their dollar is supporting, or they want to know how many species we're saving. Whereas some people want to know more about that individual animal, and some people want to know about the humans that are involved in that. So it's meeting people where they are, as well as what is their ability to act. Some people may be able to donate at a large scale, whereas other people need to be able to do something that's more hands-on, so giving of time rather than of treasure. So looking at all of these different cross-cutting factors really helps you to be able to craft messaging that reaches the people you're trying to reach.
And I think, this is really important because a lot of times when we're creating that messaging, when we're going out and, you are super passionate about what you're talking about. 9 times out of 10, you're not going to be talking about something that doesn't hold, a very big place in your heart or your world. And so we go out and we just expect, well, everyone's going to feel this way about this. And suddenly you realize, maybe not. That may not be the case, or they don't have the knowledge, or they're coming at it from a different perspective. When you talk
Absolutely.
to, especially with parrots, when you're talking to people who are living with wild parrots, in their environment, it may be an issue as far as crops are concerned. So the
Hmm.
parrots aren't the big, wonderful, beautiful, majestic bird that's flying across the sky. They're the nuisance. Or, I think
Right.
about Australia. when you go to Australia and you've got cockatoos like we've got pigeons, and people are like, "Oh, they're a nuisance." And I'm like, "Wait, what?" I
Right.
real quickly, I remember being in a park in Sydney, and I was just walking around in awe. I spent hours sitting on the ground taking pictures of cockatoos at play and foraging, and there was this little old couple, and I went over to them and I said, "So are there black cockatoos in the park?" And they're like, "Oh, yeah, they're up there by the sandstone, but there's this duck that you need to go see." And I was like, "A duck?" And they're like, "You go here," and they gave me these big directions how to get to this duck. And I'm like, "Well, this must be a pretty special damn duck." So, I trek over there. It was a Muscovy duck. Um,
Mm.
okay, so they're a little different. I was like, okay, it's a duck. I'll go find those black
Right.
cockatoos. You know,
Yeah,
it's
it's
a
all
matter,
about perspective.
and you
Yeah.
don't think about that all the time. And I think, when we're out in public with our birds, with parrots, people are like, "Oh, those are so cool." And, they talk, right? You can make it talk and you can make it do that. No, I can't make it do anything, but okay.
Right.
And I think what you're talking about, Erin, is so very important when we're crafting that message. So, yeah. So now you've got like what you're looking at, like the part of the person who you're delivering the message to. So then where do you go from there?
Yeah. So, keeping all of these different factors in mind, we developed our own SBCC practice, social and behavior change communications um, process that we are using at the Peregrine Fund to help us better develop our messaging. And so that really starts with, of course, identifying your goal. Really, everything we do ought to be goal driven. And so identifying our goal is a really important piece of that. Identifying our audiences, and no, I say audiences because there's no such thing as one audience. Everybody's coming to
Mhm.
us from a different perspective. And so, who are those people out there that we feel like we can help move the needle if we reach? Designing delivery. So, how we say something is as important as what we say. Evaluating the success, and that doesn't have to be scientific, but we can talk about the different ways you can evaluate success of your messaging, and then continuing the conversation. How do you take it from there? Because you can build, if you can connect with people and stay connected, you can build on these messages that you're sharing, these things that are important to you.
So, all right. So when you say identifying your audiences,
Hmm.
what happens when you get multiple audiences in one setting? How do you handle something like that?
That's a great question. So I think the key is to have enough to reach each audience. So, for example, when I talk about the Peregrine Fund's audiences, we have developed our own set of audiences that we've identified that we are working really hard to reach. So that includes what we call our current group, which are the people that already support us, the people that are already have already bought in and are already members or followers of our, e-newsletters, whatever it may be. We also have identified hunters as a really important group for us to be connected with. If you think about it, hunters are super engaged in the sport of hunting. Raptors hunt for a living. So there's this natural connection there, as well as the fact that a lot of hunters spend a lot of time on the landscape and they really care about wildlife. They're some of our country's first conservationists. So if we can tap into that group at the root level, we can mobilize an entire army of people to support raptor conservation. Bird enthusiasts, people that maybe have signed up for Audubon and are part of the Audubon troop, but don't know enough about us yet and might be interested in more specific information about raptors. Conservationists, maybe people who aren't worried specifically about individual species, but are interested in concepts, whether it's climate change or deforestation, food availability, things like that, that we deal with at a larger scale, as well as nature lovers,
Mhm.
people that just love being out in the woods. They spend time kayaking, they go hiking, they're mountain bikers. So this is an idea of the kind of audiences that I'm talking about, and we've developed really sort of personas or consumer archetypes for these audiences, where we've really drilled down, okay, what is the typical age range for hunters? What's the typical, gender spectrum for hunters? Who are these people? What's their average income? What kinds of things motivate them? Where are they politically? All of these things to help us better understand who these people are, so that we can
Mhm.
tailor the messages that are most interesting to them, and make sure that what we're talking about is interesting to them. So, for example, when I'm doing a presentation, I might cover a whole spectrum of issues depending on who I think might be in the audience. If I see somebody wearing camo, oh, they're one of Falcon. If I see somebody wearing camo, I'm definitely going to talk to them about our North American non-lead partnership, because that's my audience for that message. And
Mhm.
so making sure that that I'm covering a broad enough spectrum that hopefully, as we get into it and questions come about, we're able to identify who each person is and tailor that messaging to them.
And I think that's really important in the parrot world because we're dealing with a lot of different perspectives, and all of aviculture needs to kind of come together. And I think it's the same when you're talking about raptors. Any, group, you need to kind of try to solidify that support because we've got breeders, we've got,
Mhm.
rescue, rehab, rehome, stores, trainers. It's that whole world of different perspectives, and you can't just go out. And pretty quickly, I think, when you start doing outreach. And I think, in the parrot world, we get a little stuck with, well, I've got my boards, I've got my bird, I'm ready to go do outreach. And which is great that you're prepared. It's just a matter of what do you do when someone throws that question at you? Well, you
Right.
shouldn't have that bird in your home at all. Well, you shouldn't, that's not right for them. I know Chris Armstrong was listening a little bit earlier. He signed on, and Chris is a free flyer. Not
Yeah.
everyone free flies. And so then you've got the
Mhm.
person that's going, "Oh, that's horrible. Your bird's gonna, be eaten by one of Aaron's, raptors." And it's that whole, you've got to figure out who you're talking to. How are you going to, you don't have, I don't think you need to go at it with, I'm going to change their mind, but you need
Right.
to open their mind,
Yeah.
and I think we're dealing right now in the community with, some USDA regulations that are coming down the pike that are
Mhm.
they're, a huge impact, and it's not just on one segment of aviculture. It's on, a whole group. And, I know Adrian's on here. Adrian's been working on that quite a bit, with AFA. And so, but
Mhm.
you can't go in and say, "Oh, you're wrong." You just can't do that.
Right.
You've got to say,
Right.
from my perspective, that doesn't work.
Mhm.
And here's what I would suggest,
Right.
and
Coming
I
out of
feel
the solution.
education piece is what's
Yeah.
critical because
Mhm.
to say to a group of people, "No, don't do that." Okay. So my first reaction is gonna be, "Why not?" And
Right.
then it's, "Well, don't do it because." Okay, so
Yeah.
you've given me a reason, but it's diametrically opposed to my reason for why you should or shouldn't do it. Let's talk about how I can help you. So
Yeah.
you're going to do something. Let's talk about how I can educate you so that maybe those parrots aren't eating your crops. Maybe we, do something different with, how we're looking at, poachers. Yeah, I mean, that's a
Yeah.
huge issue. It has been for years. And Frank says, "Don't ask what the farmers do to the rosies." It's true. And so
Mhm.
maybe we work with people. And I think that's where this messaging becomes so critical and so important.
Absolutely.
Um, so I skipped a step, the
That's okay.
identifying your goal, because I was just so excited. But
Yeah.
so how do you do that? How do you decide what your goals are going to be when you're doing messaging?
Well, I think it's thinking through what is the most important message to you, and what messages do you think are going to reach those audiences that you're identifying. So, for example, what message is going to resonate with the farmers? How do you figure out how to get those farmers on the side of the cockatoos? And maybe that requires um, some innovations that are working with communities, with the governments, for protecting crops, for reimbursing people for loss of crops, things like that. But how do you bring people onto that side? So figuring out, first of all, why you are communicating is important. So why do you do this? Why do you take your birds places and talk to people about them? Why does it matter to you? One of the things, like, I like to encourage people is, if you're working in a group of people, you ought to be talking about this as a team on a regular basis. Or if you have a cohort of friends that goes out and you do these sort of education programs or outreach programs, why are you doing this? And meeting on a regular basis. Our executive team at the Peregrine Fund meets every other week for at least an hour to talk about our messaging. What are we saying? Why are we saying it? And how can we be saying it better? So determining those goals ahead of time helps you stay on topic when you're actually communicating with people, and it helps you to lay out ahead of time what behavior change you're trying to inspire. So am I trying to get somebody to become a member of the Peregrine Fund, or am I just trying to get somebody to stop using rodenticides outside, in their backyards? There are lots of different gradients and steps that you can ask people to do, and so figuring out which one of those, or which group of those, are the ones that you're going for. And then also, early on, thinking through how you're going to measure success. So that's an important part of goal making, is how are you going to measure if this is working or not? How do I know when I've achieved my goal? And what do I do? How do I pivot if I feel like I'm not achieving my goal? So being ready to do all of those things is really important. And as we dive into identifying your audiences, another piece of that is understanding where people are in their spectrum of knowledge. And I saw Nick put the slide up for a moment before. This really is a spectrum that we developed at the Peregrine Fund to help us identify where people are in the process of understanding. And it starts from all the way from, I don't know. Like, I know that bald eagles exist, but I really don't know anything about kestrels or red-tails or any other raptor. I don't know why they're cool. I don't really care about them. I don't think about them. So we want to take people from that point to, I know something about them. I know that they exist. I know they're cool. I know they hunt. I know that they do all these things, and that they're a bird that inspires me. And then how do you move somebody from, I know about raptors, to I care about raptors? I understand how raptors actually help the environment. I understand how they are indicator species for the health of the environment. And the same thing is true for parrots, right? How do parrots show us when an environment is healthy? That is something that resonates with people. If they can say, oh, well, there's parrots in this environment where they should be, that means that the environment is healthy. And then from I care to I support. So whether that's supporting your program specifically, or there's a conservation organization that you've partnered with and you are working to help, bring people onto the World Parrot Trust membership, or another parrot conservation organization that you care about. And then from I support to, it's my legacy. This is something that's so important to me that I'm putting it in my will, or I am thinking about it every year when it comes time to make a donation, or I am changing my behavior and encouraging other people to do the same thing. Not only do I use non-lead myself when I'm out hunting, but I advocate for my friends to use non-lead as well, because I get this to that level. So that's the spectrum we use to help us figure out, okay, our audience already knows about raptors. You guys have talked to these kids, I'm sure, that they've watched wild kratts. They know everything there is to know about macaws. And so it's getting them from that I know to, I understand why it matters. I understand why they're important. I care about them, because that's where we want people to be.
I mean, I think that's so important too, is that, and I'm sure you've experienced this, and you've worked with maybe not worked with, but you've met people that try to force that continuum. And I
Mhm.
think, there are people that are just, you know what? I care or I know, but it's never going to be my thing. And I
Right.
think so rather than be like, no, you gotta, you have to. How do you move people along that continuum of engagement to kind of get them? Maybe they're never going to get to that legacy point either, but how do you
Mhm.
move them along?
Yeah. So, one example that I'll use is that vultures are a big deal for us at the Peregrine Fund. And those of you who know about raptor conservation know that vultures are threatened almost everywhere on the planet. And a lot of it is the same reason. It's contaminants in the environment. Whether it's diclofenac in Asia that almost wiped out 3 species of vultures, or pesticide poisoning in Africa, or whether it's uh, lead ingestion here in North America with the California condor. Vultures need our help, and they're a particularly important species because of what they do. They're scavengers. They're true scavengers. There are not a lot of true scavengers out there. So they play this very important niche in the environment. So I talk about the importance of vultures and what they mean to the environment. I also put it in terms of monetary value and tell the story of vultures in Asia. When the vulture crisis happened in India and Pakistan in the late 1990s and early 2000s, we came close to losing 3 species of vultures. 97 to 99% of the 3 species of vultures were gone in like a 10-year time period. That's startling. And these birds played an important role in the environment. They helped to keep carcasses from over polluting, sort of these carcass dumps, because a lot of people in that region keep cattle, but they don't eat their cattle for religious reasons. So the cows would die, they'd go to this carcass dump, and the vultures would come in, they'd clean it up, and it'd be a nice symbiotic relationship. Well, when the anti-inflammatory drug diclofenac was brought into that system through veterinary medicine for the cattle, uh, a lot of those vultures started dying. And the Peregrine Fund funded a biologist who went over there and figured out why. And the reason for that was this diclofenac, which caused kidney failure in the vultures. And so, fortunately, the governments of India and Pakistan were willing to work with us, and they banned the use of diclofenac for veterinary medicine and stopped the decline of vultures. But in the meantime, feral dogs moved in to take over the role of cleaning up carcass dumps. And with feral dogs came rabies, and people were being bitten. And it ended up costing the government of India more than $30 billion in additional health care costs to deal with these rabies. And a lot of people died, and dogs are still a problem there. And we're slowly working to bring back the populations of vultures, but it's going to take some time. And in the meantime, the dogs are a big problem. So when I say that vultures are valuable, they're literally valuable to
Right.
our economy and to our health. And so if we can make those connections, some people that really resonates. Those numbers really resonate, and understanding the economic value of wildlife really resonates. So when we can make those connections and tie them together, it helps. And then also helping people to understand that they have a really important role to play in this. So I usually jump from that story, and here we're kind of talking a little bit about designing delivery. And I think it's
Right.
important to use stories. And I actually tell audiences, I'm going to tell you a story before I dive into the Asian vulture crisis, because it triggers this response, this um, intentional listening in an audience
Mhm.
when they hear, oh, you're telling me a story. I expect a beginning, a middle, and end. And so I package all of that together. And then as soon as I'm done with that story and I've got them all hooked, I remind them that this is happening right here in the US too with California
Mhm.
condors. And by the way, it's not just affecting California condors, it's bald eagles and golden eagles and all these species that we really care about. But here's the good news: because it's a problem we've created, it's a problem we can solve. And hunters across the country are choosing to continue conservation ethic that has been an important part of the hunting heritage from the time our country was founded. Hunters today are switching to non-lead ammunition, and it's helping to save these birds that we all care about. And so if you can kind of come at it from as many different directions as you can, whether it's this is the value of birds, what they do for our environment, this is what vultures do in terms of cleaning up the environment, to this is the economic value of vultures, to
Mhm.
this is something that's happening right here in our backyards and you can help. You have the power. So yeah, crows as well, Adrian. It's so true. Like all of these animals are being affected by the lead issue. So, um, but like I said, positive outcomes is really a key to this, building emotional connections and providing solutions.
Well, and I think, I've talked before about, don't start with the sob story. Don't start with
Yeah.
"Oh, it's awful," because yes, you can garner some sympathy that way, but sympathy doesn't always lead to action. And
Right.
it's not an inspiring message. We want to talk
Mhm.
about, you know, how magnificent the California condor is, how magnificent
Yeah.
an American kestrel is. And I know you guys
Mhm.
have done, projects with kestrels, and it's just, it's really, when we talk about parrots, a lot of times we, talk about, oh, and there's, X number in rescue, X number in rehab and need to be rehomed. And that is true. It is true. But
Mhm.
there are, just as many who are in wonderful situations in human care that,
Yeah.
are doing great. And let's talk about the ones in the wild, and how do we support that wild parrot conservation, and how do we
Yeah.
make a difference with that? And to
Yeah.
me, you know, that's what's so important. I don't if I go somewhere, so if I go to see your presentation at the Peregrine Fund, I don't want to be sad when I leave.
No.
I wanna be motivated, and when people come to bird marts and bird fairs and they see you with your parrots, they wanna talk about how cool that bird is and all the cool things that bird does, and, what are they like? Where do they live? Da, da, da. What do they eat? They don't wanna hear about the sad ones, the sad
Mhm.
stories. So, how are we talk, like you said, we're talking about design delivery. So, what is what does that mean to you? Like, explain to folks who are listening who are not marketing geniuses like you. What
I
does
don't
that
know about
mean?
that. Yeah,
Oh,
so
absolutely.
when I'm when I'm designing delivery, I'm being very intentional to tell stories, ask questions, lead people along this pathway of discovery. I'm being very intentional about what I say, when, and how I say it, what words I'm using, what inflection in my voice I'm using, the expressions on my face, the passion that I'm letting show. I'm doing that all very intentionally to get people to this point where they're on board, because we need
Mhm,
people to move along that continuum. And so, whether or not that is, talking to people about, pet parrots. And yes, pet parrots can be great, but here's all the science we know about how to keep parrots happy and healthy and enriched and living
mhm,
great lives, keeping it, like you said, keeping it positive, not talking necessarily about the parrots that have terrible lives, but focusing on, if you are thinking about having a pet parrot, here's all the things that you should know going into it. There's this whole world out there of people who have been doing this for a really long time and know how to provide the best care for these birds. As well as, talking about conservation with parrots, it's very similar to raptors. That's one of the cool things I think about raptors and parrots. It's this niche group of birds that have people very specifically focused on conserving them in the wild, people that are working together, that are working with communities, doing a lot of community based conservation work. And there's a lot of success stories because of that.
mhm,
So while it's okay to talk about the stories where we're still fighting, we're still working hard to protect African gray parrots. But let me tell you about this this exciting thing, because we don't celebrate conservation enough. We don't celebrate the successes. And we need people to know that there are successes so that they feel inspired to be a part of it, to help. So let me tell you about the Spix's macaws that are just about to be released. That's exciting stuff. This is a huge milestone. And yes, conservation takes a long time. It takes years. It took us 30 years to get the peregrine falcon back to the point where we could take it off the endangered species list. But my gosh, we took a species off the endangered species list for the right reasons. That's huge.
Yeah.
So let's celebrate that, and let's share that with people, and help people understand that they can be a part of that, because all it takes is people that care and are willing to work together and are willing to see it through to the end.
And I think, we had, a couple weeks ago, I had Hafet, Velez. I don't know if you're from Hafet works for US Fish and Wildlife at the Puerto Rican Parrot Project.
Oh,
And
fantastic.
he's worked for 32 years. And he said when he started, there were 47, I believe, Puerto Rican Amazons in the wild.
Wow.
There are now
Wow.
over 900 in 32 years. I mean,
That's amazing.
it's mind blowing. And it's just,
Yeah.
and there are people that have had little parts in doing that. And it's that I think, the other thing that I like to do if I'm talking to someone and trying to encourage action is let them know that even the smallest step, it's the Lorax.
Yeah.
If one
Yeah.
person cares a whole awful lot. And,
That's
I
right.
think it's about people can do something. And,
Yeah.
how do you get that message across, Erin, when you're trying to get people when you're that call to action needs to happen? How do you
Right.
encourage people to
So one of my favorite things to do is tell people the founding story of the Peregrine Fund, because we have a great founding story. Most people know that Dr. Tom Cade was the founder of the Peregrine Fund, but what most people don't know is that our organization became an organization because of two elementary school age boys. Two boys that read an article about the peregrine falcon in Boys Life magazine, went door to door in their neighborhood and collected change, sent it to Dr. Cade. Dr. Cade went to the bank to put that money in the bank for the Peregrine Recovery Project. It was like $4. It was nothing like significant. But these kids, they did it. And Tom went to the bank, and the banker asked him, what should we call the bank account? And he's like, let's call it the Peregrine Fund. Two boys.
nice? Yeah.
Yeah. So I love telling that story because it reminds everybody that we all have a piece to play. We all have a part to play. We might not know exactly how what we're doing right now will affect the future, will affect other people, will affect the world. But if we don't try, we can't do anything. So it's one of those things that I think if you can give some of these authentic stories, talk about the Puerto Rican parrot, talk about the fact that we went from such a small number of birds to, a healthy, thriving population. That's huge. People
Mhm.
don't know those stories. They hear the sad stories. They hear the stories about the number of animals being poached in different places. Let's tell them the let's tell them the happy stories. Let's talk about the successes and celebrate those successes, because that's what motivates people. We know that people are motivated by success. We know that people want to be a
Mhm.
part of success. And if we can inspire everyone to act, even if it's the smallest thing, it can change the world. I always tell
Yeah,
people, like, I yeah. I would rather
no,
have an impact on a kid that grows up to become the CEO of an oil company than a kid that grows up to be exactly like me, like, because we can change the world by inspiring people who have positions of power in places where conservation is not always the forefront of their minds. That's how we change the world.
and I think it's important to when you're delivering that message that you can see that light bulb moment happen. You can see when someone in your audience it resonates with it. That's exactly it. You have that
Yeah.
moment and okay. And that's when you need to capitalize on it. That's when you need to step
Absolutely.
in there and really, and it's that fishing. It's that,
Yeah.
I cast out my non-lead sinker and
Yeah.
I get the hook and then you reel them in and it's just, you've got a steward for life in a child. That
Yeah.
child, you can see it happen. And it's about reading your
Absolutely.
audience and figuring that out. And I think that's really important. But so do you use live birds in your
We
presentations?
do. Yeah, so we do. So typically, like, for example, when I start my vulture talk that we've been talking about, that we've been using as sort of a case study, I usually start by asking people, how many of you love vultures? How many of you would say the vulture is your favorite animal on the planet? I know a few of us who know better raise our hands. But most of the audience kind of giggles when you ask that question. They're like, vultures, no way, and so I always tell people, well, if you just met a vulture, you would love a vulture. And today you're going to meet a vulture. But first, let me tell you about why vultures are so important. And I launch into the whole story that we've already talked about. And then I bring out Lucy, the turkey vulture. And so I don't have an African vulture. I don't have an Asian vulture. I don't even have a California condor that I can bring out and show people up close, but I can bring people Lucy. And Lucy, I call the spokes vulture for all vultures around the world. And she is ridiculously adorable. We all work with birds. We all know the power that meeting a bird nose to beak has with people and how that changes their emotion, how they start to care about the bird. And when you care about something, you're more likely to do something to protect it. And so we bring out Lucy, we show people how awesome Lucy is, all the amazing, you know, adaptations she has on her body for survival. We talk about how she has a pH of 1 in her stomach, which means that she can digest all these nasty bacteria that you and I can, and consequently that helps to keep our waterways clean and our livestock from getting sick and things like that. And people fall in love with Lucy. You are going to love Lucy, Lori. I swear you will. You cannot not love Lucy. I mean, she's a beautiful redhead, right? So people do. And so at the end, I ask people, okay, vulture might still not be your favorite animal, but how many of you like vultures a whole lot more than you did before they started? And everybody raises their hands. Everybody does. So having that connection with that live animal is critical. But I've also, when I was younger, in my younger days, I would bring a vulture out. And the first thing I would talk about is how they vomit and how they poop down their legs and all these things that are just really not that appealing for people and not the message I want to get across. The message I want to get across is that these animals are important. I can't get that
Mhm.
across if I've grossed everybody out. So,
Yeah.
focusing on the things that are important to your message is key.
And I think that's something we do need to think about. We need to think about, because a lot of times we'll do the negative, not just the sad story, but we'll do the negative parts, like,
Yeah,
cockatoos scream, and it's something you do need to know.
right.
I just moved into a new neighborhood and there is a cockatoo down the street, and I haven't heard it yet. And honestly, I'm like, it's the quietest cockatoo on the planet. But I've seen it. I've seen it and I know it's there. But I think it's about, you don't want to put people off with all those. Yeah, I mean, let's be honest. Have you ever worked with a bird, Erin, that was just a complete pleasure and there was never anything that was off-putting about that bird?
No, not really. Because they all have their own personalities. We all know that. They all have their own intricacies, their quirks, their baggage that they come with. And honestly, I think that's what makes them more fun to work with. But is
Yeah,
learning
well,
about
that's
those
always been
things.
for me with any behavior change, whether it be
Yeah,
human or non-human. It's that challenge for me that is
absolutely.
always kind of driving factor. But I think,
Yeah.
talking about the cool things that these animals are
Mhm.
capable of, and
Mhm.
how a hyacinth macaw cracks open a macadamia nut, and here you
Yeah.
go. Could you possibly do this? Can you do it with a hammer?
Yeah.
Those kind of facts are where we want to
Yeah.
go. And it's easy to do the, oh, you're not going to believe how loud this bird can be. And you're not going to, okay,
Mhm.
save that for when the person comes to you and says, I live in a, 10 by 10 apartment and I want to buy a cockatoo. That's
Right.
when you share those facts.
Yeah.
And as far as wild conservation, I mean, none of us have vultures or condors or, a lot of any of the birds that you work with, but
Yeah.
people have parrots in their home that also live in the
Mhm.
wild. There are
Yeah.
those parrots out there that need our help. And so
Mhm.
to me, that's an even closer connection that you can say, we they have a king. Oh, Eva's like, I have a king vulture. I'm like, you don't have a king vulture. They have a king vulture that she got to play with because she caught her when she took off at the bird club meeting. Okay.
Wow.
So, Eva gets to do really cool things anyway. But yeah, it's that connection. It's that moment,
I
and
agree.
knowing my bird at home has a counterpart out in the wild that needs my help. Or,
Right.
the vulture, Lucy, has a counterpart out in the wild that
Yeah.
really needs our help. And I think
Right.
that's,
Yeah.
a good way to make that connection with having an
Absolutely.
animal with you. As long as
Yeah.
so here's my caveat on that one, Erin. Handling them correctly.
Absolutely. Yep.
I I think that's critical, is that we're talking about making sure that the way you're handling them, the way you're treating them is always, you know, it's part of your messaging.
Right. Because if somebody's concerned about the welfare of your bird while you're handling it, they can't be listening to the message that you're sharing because they're worrying about that individual. So making sure that you are at the top of your game in terms of training and behavioral change science and knowing eh, how to handle those birds, how to provide proper care, how to demonstrate to audiences that you're an expert in
Mhm,
your field is important, because it also adds validity to what you're saying. And I think something you touched upon, Robin, that's really valuable is sharing how people with pet parrots are helping birds in the wild. Dub your parrot a, you know, a spokes macaw or a spokes cockatoo. We call Lucy the spokes vulture, but every single group of birds out there can have a spokes animal for them, a spokes individual. And so if you are talking about Spix's macaws and you have a scarlet macaw and you are wanting to make that connection, just call your scarlet macaw the spokes macaw for all wild macaws. Own
yeah.
that. And I think that's a really good way to connect people.
So let me ask you this, as far as sending a message, do you have Lucy do anything when is she only on the glove, or do you have her do any behaviors that are not natural behaviors for her?
Um, that's a good question. We do not have her do any unnatural behaviors. The behaviors that she does when she's out with us, besides sitting on the glove, and we're very careful to have her in a position where people can see that she can fly away if she wants to.
Mhm,
Nobody is forcing her to stay there, and sometimes she does. Sometimes she goes and explores, and we don't prevent her from doing that. We'll redirect her if we feel like she's getting too close to an audience member, but
mhm,
for the most part, she loves to run around on the ground and explore. And we have a large grassy area where she can do that while we're talking to people about her. And that just endears her to people. And we do talk about how they do spend time running around on the ground when they're at a carcass, and how just because she is a social animal doesn't mean that she's friendly. They spend a lot of time sort of beating each other up at the carcass as well. And so they hang out in groups, but it doesn't mean that they're all lovey-dovey with each other. And we
mhm,
talk about some of those natural behaviors that we see coming out. We talk about her flight and how to identify a turkey vulture when you're looking at them. So using the bird's behavior to derive sort of your natural history messaging, I think is a very valuable tool, and
mhm,
getting people engaged in what the bird is doing. Having a bird demonstrate things that, or having you talking about things the birds are demonstrating naturally on their own, really drives messaging home for people and helps it to be more memorable.
And I think that's fairly easy to do if you've got parrots that may not be flighted. If they're not
Yeah.
free flighted, you can still do that with a parrot on a perch. You can give them
Mhm.
a nut to demonstrate, their jaws, their beak strength. You
Yeah.
can, do those kind of things. You can, show the mimicry that they do by, going back and forth with them. It's just, for me, messaging, one of the important parts of messaging is not having the completely unnatural behaviors. Asking a bird
Right.
to do something that is not in their natural repertoire, you're telling people
Absolutely.
that that's something that either they all should be doing or they can be doing, and that's not necessarily true. And I think, you know, it's okay when you're talking about a bird to talk about that there are some limitations with what this bird is able to do. It's
Mhm.
not, it may not be able to not all parrots talk, or,
Mhm.
whatever that may be. So what have we got here? Who's this? Is that Lucy?
I don't Oh, that is Lucy with our trainer Curtis.
Look at
How
Nick.
funny.
Sorry, I
Nick
didn't
is
have any
our
pictures of Vultures, so I went and researched that one
Oh,
really
on the
quickly.
spot. Nice. Yeah. That is Lucy, Miss Lucy Liu. And yeah, she's just, I think they were doing a Facebook Live for this presentation. And so you can see how gentle Curtis is with her. One of the things we talk about with our birds a lot of times, because we don't force our birds to do anything that they don't want to do. So, one of the
Mhm,
things we talk about is if one of the birds doesn't want to come out and do a program, it's not stepping up. We explain that to people. We don't try and like gloss over the reality of these birds being thinking individuals who may or may not feel like flying from one edge of the bridge to the other. And so not not making them do something that they're not willing to do is an
mhm.
important part of that, sort of showing how caring you are with your birds and how important they are to you. So Lucy
And
is targeted to that tennis ball on the stick there, so it's
so I'm
one of the things
laughing
that.
because one of the things that I harp on with people is that target training is, you should do it with everybody, with all of your birds.
Yeah,
They should all be target
yep,
trained. And look, you guys, even Lucy is target trained. So, and
yep,
I think it's interesting to note that Curtis definitely read what she was telling him when she was on the one side. And he didn't just
mhm,
keep cueing her over and over and over again to come
right,
across that bridge. Yeah, no riding of bikes, Lori. Absolutely not. They're all teasing me, Aaron,
absolutely.
because that's my pet peeve is
Yeah,
um, the riding of bikes. But so, and he helped her, he helped her go over to the other side where that reinforcer was. And I think
right,
it's nice to see that he is that aware of her body language. And I think sometimes when we're asking a bird to do a certain behavior, when we're requesting that behavior, we may, you know, do that cue over and over and over again, and we're building
mhm,
latency at that point, and we're also, showing people that, well, really that bird's not doesn't understand what she's asking, or that
absolutely,
bird doesn't want to do what she's asking them to do. And I think
right,
it's when that's part of that message. It's and how you carry yourself too is part of the
mhm,
message. If you're doing
yeah,
this kind of thing, and that doesn't
mhm,
send a good message. And so there's
yeah,
a lot that goes into the outreach piece. And I'm not saying, be all bluster and bravado and I'm, so
right,
cool because I have these birds, but be aware of what you're doing. I remember a colleague of
mhm.
ours did a paper at IAATE about how you carry crates. Do you remember that one?
Yes, it was the best, yeah,
It was Matt Edmonds, and it was an
yeah,
amazing presentation. And when I first looked at it, I'm like, how to carry a crate. I'm like, how's he going to do a whole presentation on that? But it makes a difference, when you're bringing your birds into somewhere, whether it's a vulture or a condor or a parrot. When you're bringing your
mhm,
birds somewhere, swinging the crate along is not showing those animals any respect whatsoever. It's not safe.
right,
And then
right,
no roller skating either, Karen Anderson. And then, but when you get there, people are like, oh, well, you can do whatever you want with these birds. It's not true. So
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah.
there's so much that goes
Yeah, and
into it.
I loved in that presentation Curtis was doing, and I've actually never seen that one. So I was kind of like, oh, what's going to happen next? But I love how he just takes the opportunity to stand back and let Lucy spread her wings, enjoy the sun a little bit. And he takes that opportunity to share messaging with people rather than trying to get the bird to focus on him and try and, be the center of attention with that bird. He's letting her kind of shine while he just explains to people what's so cool about her.
Mhm.
And I think that is that's something that I really like to see out of our trainers, because I like to see that they're so confident in who they are and what they're doing that they don't need to sort of steal the show from the birds. They're letting the birds be the center of attention.
Right. It's not about look at me, bird trainer. It's look at
Right.
this bird. And I
Yeah,
think
and it's
that is, yeah.
yeah, it's going back to what are your goals? What are your goals
Mhm.
for this? Why are you doing this presentation? Why does it matter to people that you get up in front of them? Why does it matter to the birds that you get up in front of people to talk about them? So,
The
yeah,
other thing I
so
noticed as we critique poor Curtis, the other thing I
I
noticed
know.
is he waits until he has her attention.
Yes. Yeah.
It's not, just like over and over again asking for a behavior. It's waiting till he knows that, okay, now she's at least focused on what I'm asking her. So that's
Yeah.
kind of cool. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, you can
Yeah.
do whatever you want with your bird so long as your bird wants to do it. It's true.
Right.
I mean,
Absolutely.
we you've gotta take that into consideration when you're working with them. So,
Yeah.
all right, Erin, how do we get to I've been successful in my messaging?
Yeah.
How do
Yeah.
how do we decide that?
So this is a really interesting way to think about evaluating success, because for a scientific organization like the Peregrine Fund is, where science drives everything, I'm going to give you a really non-scientific answer. And the way that I typically evaluate success when I'm doing a program, I'm doing it on the fly. I want to see who's staying engaged, how many people are coming up and asking me questions afterwards. When I do our Fall Flights Bird Show every September, October, and I'm up there doing the speaking, one of my goals is to try and get as many people as possible to become members after the show. So you can ask our membership staff. As soon as the show's over, I run up and I ask, okay, how many people became members today? Because I judge the success of my messaging based on the number of people that I've inspired to become members. And of course, that's not scientific, because there's all those cross-cutting factors that may
Mhm.
determine who in the audience can become a member, wants to become a member, all of those things. But for me, it's a good ballpark way to evaluate if my messaging worked. And so I'm watching feedback from the audience. I'm wondering what kinds of questions they're going to ask me at the end. Do you want to learn more about non-lead ammunition? And do you want to dive deeper? Do you want me to share with you the websites that have information about the ballistics of the bullets? If I can get people at that level, I know I've done a good job.
There you go. So, all right, so you've got me. You've hooked me. I come to your
Mhm.
event. I see your birds. I'm super pumped and I'm like, that's really cool. And I go home and
And then
that
what?
woman was cool with those birds, but how do you
Right. So
keep them
how do we keep
engaged?
yeah, how do we keep the conversation going? And this is where things like social media are so valuable. The ability to send people to your Facebook page and keep them engaged, on your Instagram page, keep them engaged that way, keep talking about the things that you're doing. Um, Live streams like this are super useful. That's why we do live streams like Curtis was doing with Lucy the turkey vulture. We want to keep people engaged. We want to keep bringing them along that spectrum. And so usually when I do a program, I'm pointing towards another direction to keep people engaged. So here's where you can go to find more information about this. Hey, next Thursday, we're doing a live stream on the World Center for Birds of Prey social media page on the Facebook page. Join us, and you'll get to see another bird, a different bird than what you've already seen. QR codes are amazing. We have been using QR codes to get people right. Yeah, just like here, we've been using QR codes to get people to engage with content after the fact. And so whether it's as simple as me having it on my own phone that I can put that QR code up and then people can come up and scan it afterwards with their phone. We're putting them on our signage everywhere to help people, you want to learn more about red-tailed hawks? Here's how to dive deeper. And we're using them to point people towards videos we've created, videos that share about what the Peregrine Fund is at a larger scale. So you came to the World Center for Birds of Prey and you learned a lot about the projects we do. Well, here, let's show you some of the projects via video. We also plan events far in advance. So we do a live streaming of the California Condor release, the annual release that we do in Arizona every September. It's September 24th this year, and it'll be on our YouTube page. So if you'd like to follow along, you'll get to watch California condors take their very first flights in the wild. Birds that were hatched in human care take their very first flights. And so being able to engage with people along that way is a really valuable way to keep the conversation going. So thinking creatively about what you can do to keep the conversation going.
So there's so much more. I love talking to you about this. And so the QR code that's on the screen now is will take you to the Peregrine Fund. If people want to come visit, Erin, where are you located?
So our headquarters is in Boise, Idaho. And so come on out to Oh Boise, and we would love to have you visit us. We do have some offices in other parts of the world. If you end up in Madagascar, Kenya, or Ecuador, we have offices in those places. But our headquarters is right here in Idaho, and it's the heart of our education programs as well. It's where you can meet Lucy, as well as a lot of other really cool birds of prey, and you can meet Curtis too. So all of the excitement.
We're gonna start a Curtis fan club here on the Friday Night Block.
Curtis doesn't even know.
We'll stalk him on Facebook. It's all good.
There you go.
So just I know this is a whole nother night's discussion, but can you just list some of the successes, projects that the Peregrine Fund has been responsible for?
Yeah. So, of course, we were founded in 1970 to save the peregrine falcon, which at the time was extinct east of the Mississippi River. And there were only about 40 pairs left in the Western United States. In 1999, the peregrine falcon was taken off the endangered species list. And there are so many today that we don't even keep track of them anymore. We don't know how many there are. There are so many in North America, which is really exciting. And that was our first real conservation project. But while we were working on that, we expanded globally and we started working on the island of Mauritius with the Mauritius kestrel, a very small falcon found on that island. And when we started working with them, there were only 4 individuals left on the planet. When we were finished working with them, when we had counted it off as a success, there were over 800 on the island of Mauritius. We worked to stop the extinction of 3 species of vultures in Southeast Asia or Southern Asia, and that has been a very successful program. We have worked with the Ridgway's hawk in Dominican Republic. That species, there was only one small population in this very tiny national park called Los Haitises National Park, which is very concerning, especially for a Caribbean island species, because if a bad hurricane hits, it could wipe out the entire population. And so we've worked to expand their population into other regions. And now we have 2 other groups of Ridgway's hawks living on the island, which helps to add protection. And we have communities that are working to protect those birds. And it's a very exciting project that has been very successful. The California condor, there were only 22 of them left in the world in the 1980s. Today, there are over 550 of them, about half of which are in human care as part of the breeding program. And we have a lot of partners with that. It's not just us. It's U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. It's the LA Zoo, the San Diego Zoo, Santa Barbara Zoo, and Oregon Zoo have all partnered together to bring the species back from the brink of extinction. Today, we have 110 in adults in or juveniles and adults flying free in northern Arizona and southern Utah, and we've had several hatch in the last couple of weeks. We just had nestling number 10 hatch at the World Center for Birds of Prey. So those birds will go back out into the wild in about a year and a half. And so we are doing everything we can, everywhere we can, to help save birds of prey, but not just help save birds of prey, also enrich communities that live in those places and help them develop stronger economies so they can send their kids to school without having to tear down habitat or degrade the natural resources. We have put hundreds of students through master's and PhD programs all over the world so that they can become biologists and we can build conservation capacity in the countries where we're working. And I could go on forever because I absolutely love the organization and I feel so lucky to get to be a part of it.
I remember when Erin first became a part of that organization, and we were all thrilled for you, and just you have done amazing things there. It's again, I hope you all see that smile that she brings, because she does. And the other part of what makes me smile is the message that you convey and the things that you do for the raptors in our lives. So thank you very, very much. And if you guys, I highly suggest that you dive deeper into the Peregrine Fund. I think, you'll see some of the amazing work that's been done, and hopefully it will inspire you. And when you're out there doing your messaging with your parrots and the animals in your lives, really think about what you're conveying to people, and really work on getting that passion to come across to your audiences. So, and an audience doesn't always have to be hundreds of people or 30 people. It can be one person. And if you've inspired that one person, then it's a win. It's a six. If we're measuring success and you've inspired that one person to action, then it's a win. So it's a success. All right.
Sure.
Thank you again, Erin. This has been awesome. I want to thank you guys for tuning in on a Friday as summer approaches. Next weekend is Memorial Day weekend. We're going to do just some fun stuff. Hopefully, we want to, absolutely remember and honor those who have served and who have given their lives. And it's I think sometimes Memorial Day gets lost in the 3-day weekend, but kind of take a few minutes and think about what it's really all about. And next Friday night, Nick and I will be here, and we're gonna have some fun for you guys. So hopefully we'll see you. If you are going away, have a ball. I will not be the least bit offended if you're out enjoying your first weekend of summer. So you guys take care, and we will see some of you, if not all of you, next week. Take care, Erin. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Robin. Thanks, everybody.